Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. And today I thought we would take a dive into some creepy Reddit stories that I found. We're going to be getting my first reactions to this as well. I've kind of just skimmed through these, seeing how they were. I've got 4 stories lined up for us today, and we'll start reading through them as we go. In the background, you'll just see me trying to escape some killers in a game called Dead by Daylight. I thought it'd go well together. Creepy Reddit stories, kinda creepy game. Hope you guys are ready for this. I definitely do not do good with horror stuff. I am also recording this at night, and if you are listening to this at night, well, I hope you'll be able to sleep better than I'll probably be able to sleep tonight. So, nonetheless, let's start reading and let's get into our first story. The first story is titled, "I'm a new intern for the state prison. Weird things are already happening." I'm in my senior year of college as a criminology major. And one of the classes I need to take for my undergrad is an internship class. One of my professors coordinates with us and secures us an internship at a relevant organization and hopes that we gain some field experience on top of all the boring and borderline useless theory we learn. I happened to land an internship with the Central State Prison, which I was ecstatic about. I was thrilled to be able to learn from real people working in the field and to pick the brain of whatever behavioral analyst or psychologist they had on board. And that's another one of my career interests. I'm wishing I could say I was still as excited about it as I was then. I'm only 3 days into the position, and more shit has gone down than I thought would. Admittedly, part of me had wanted crazy things to happen going into this so I could live out my Brooklyn 99 dreams, but I think whatever God that had answered my prayers took too many liberties in their interpretation. The weird shit started happening as early as the first day. My supervisor, Mr. Hale, introduced me to all of the staff. I was the only intern they hired this semester, so I didn't really have the freedom to slip into the background. I was then given a tour of the huge facility. It was a well-lit, spacious, and cleaner than I assumed it would be. It still had the dingy, sweaty smell fit for a place with 1,000 men all crammed together, but it certainly didn't seem to violate any health codes. My first steps along with Mr. Hale's echoed as we walked the halls of the building. As we walked and talked, he explained the history and relevance of the little details within each sector. I didn't realize then how strange it was that the only voice I could hear was his. He eventually led me down one of the cell hallways. Most, if not all of the cells were filled with men of varying ages in groups of 2. I was led to an empty cell in the middle of the lengthy hallway. Hale took his time opening the cell door to show me the inside. It was probably a 10-foot square with 2 beds on opposing walls with a toilet in the corner. It seemed fairly standard for a prison cell, but it was surprisingly clean, too. I assumed there hadn't been a resident in this specific cell for a while. I don't know about you guys, but I would not last in those prison cells. You can call me a little princess or whatever, but those prison cells are absolutely not it for me. All the grimy, especially the toilet. Oh my gosh, my bathroom stays in pristine condition. You throw me in a prison toilet, that thing's taking me out first before anything else. Back to the story. On the way back out of the cell hallway, I didn't get so much as a glance in my direction from the inmates, which I thought was a little odd, but ultimately a relief. I figured the wardens just ran a tight ship because I had expressed my interest to speak with the mental health professional on board. My supervisor also introduced me to her. She was an older woman named Diane Kendrick, or Dr. Kendrick. Hale let me speak with her for a while he went on his lunch break. I sat down in a red patterned chair across from her desk and looked around the room. There was hardly any decoration on the walls except for her diplomas and certificates proudly displayed behind her. Everything else was covered in bookshelves housing all kinds of mental health and self-help books. She had a Keep Calm and Practice CBT mug holding all of her writing utensils, which looked like it was taken straight from someone else's Etsy cart. Also on her desk were a few picture frames with figures I couldn't make out standing together in a wide open field. The room was filled with a suffocating floral scent, something awfully fitting for a woman her age. "So, Dr. Kendrick, what does a typical day look like for you?" I asked her after all the usual small talk about my major and my interests. "Well, I usually only work the day shift since our night shift is covered by nursing staff. I begin my workday around 7 o'clock. I do paperwork, then take some patients and work with them on whatever treatment plan they've been assigned. That takes up a majority of the day. Then I typically go home at around 6, she said, closing her eyes and putting a finger on her chin as she recounted a typical day's events. It's a long workday, but I like to make sure I get everything done and leave it all here before going home. You will quickly learn that a healthy work-life balance is very important with this kind of job. Some things can haunt you if you don't take proper care of yourself." I nodded despite my sudden discomfort. Why would she say that? Dr. Kendrick kept talking, but I was still hung up on what she told me, only because of how out of place it was. I understood the intense nature of the field, but saying it was haunting caused my stomach to churn. I continued to ask about whatever information she was able to share with me, the kind of schooling she did to get her position, her favorite aspect of the job, etc. Eventually the conversation shifted to what kind of therapy she practiced and what she believes work best in her experience. I have a somewhat eccentric belief that many people in my field might disagree with. I have just found that these methods work best for my clients. I like to practice psychodynamic therapy through hypnosis, Dr. Kendrick said. I was somewhat confused by this as a pretty outdated practice used in the time of Freud and all these other quacks. On the other hand, though, I didn't see why others should judge if it was actually working for people. I find that it's really helpful if I can get into the minds of my patients without any roadblocks getting in the way, she added. Probably at the sight of my confused expression, Mr. Hale returned, and after expressing my gratitude, I was ushered out of Dr. Kendrick's office into the cafeteria for lunch. I was hesitant of the idea of dining with all the inmates once they were out of their cells, but to my disbelief, it was more orderly than even an elementary school cafeteria. No one said a word to each other as they were served their food, though it only vaguely resembled food. Then moved in a single-file line to their seemingly designated seats at the rows of tables. They ate in complete silence. I had never seen anything like it before. I stared at them all, utterly transfixed, figuring I wouldn't be spoken to or approached. I chose any random seat to eat my meal at. A young, mousy-looking inmate was next to me. He didn't seem suited for the prison, so I wondered what landed him here, though I didn't dare ask, at the obnoxious repeated sound of him banging his metal spoon against plastic. I looked up at the man in slight irritation, then down at his plate. In his runny mashed potatoes he had written something that vaguely resembled, "Help." I looked up at him again to find him already staring at me with poorly veiled terror and tears in his eyes. Before I could ask him anything back, he turned to his tray and disturbed his mashed potato note as he began shoveling them in his mouth. Tears dripped into his food, but he didn't seem to notice. I don't know what to make of this bizarre encounter. I thought I was prepared for dealing with potentially disorderly or insane criminals, but I wasn't ready for this kind of behavior. They had posed no inherent threat to me to despise being prisoners, but something still stirred in the pit of my stomach at how subdued and orderly they were. It had to be some kind of sick prank they were pulling on the poor young intern. I didn't want to think about what an alternative would be out of fear of getting in trouble for disrupting the inmates on my first day. I gathered my tray and went to meet back up with Mr. Hale. I scanned the room as I stood next to him for the remainder of the lunch period, and I met the eyes of another inmate sitting across from where I stood. His head was shaved with tattoos where his hair would have been. The tattoos continued down his face and body. as far as the black jumpsuit he wore allowed me to see. There was a strange glint in his eyes. They turned wide at the sight of me, inhumanly wide. I didn't think someone could do that without their eyes popping out of their skull. I grew incredibly uneasy at the sight, but I didn't look away. He signaled with his eyes towards me, Mr. Hale standing next to me. The only response I could muster was a nod, despite not understanding what he was trying to say. He maintained this extreme eye contact, unblinking for the rest of his lunchtime, never pausing the continuous mindless shoveling of food into his mouth. Blood blossomed in his eyes, replacing the tears that had formed and quickly dried up. I don't know why I maintained his gaze for so long. I don't think I could have looked away, even if I wanted to. The only thing that took me out of the moment was the sound of shuffling feet, walkie-talkies beeping and hissing their unintelligible stream of speech, and trays being scraped and stacked. Soon after, the inmate blinked as he was disrupted from his trance. Bloody tears ran out of the corner of his eyes, which he couldn't wipe off. How nobody noticed was completely beyond me. "Why don't I show you my office?" Mr. Hale asked from beside me, disrupting me from my own trance. I could only respond with a nod, my throat too tight to let out a proper response. We turned to leave and walked down another set of hallways to his office, which looked to be close to where Dr. Kendricks was. I stood and looked around at the similarly blank walls of his office while he explained the nature of his work as the head of ward in a facility. I could hardly listen to what he was saying, and my mind was still racing, trying to make sense of what happened earlier. To say it merely disturbed me was an understatement. He then gave me a menial task to complete as he did some work that urgently required his attention. I made my way to the small desk in the corner of his office, which looked like it was hastily put together prior to my arrival. I abstinently clicked on my computer after finishing what he told me to do. Then, out of boredom, I decided to look up the history of this facility. There was nothing out of the place or remotely interesting about its past, just that it was opened in December of 1884, and Mr. Hale became the head warden in 2022. I desperately wanted to find out some reasoning or explanation as to why all the prisoners had been behaving so strangely. I chalked it up to those guys being some of the facility's mental health patients and decided to forget about it. I just needed to make it through the next 10 weeks. I couldn't lose my mind before then. That wrapped up my first day on the job. The longer I'm here, the more I learn things that simple Google searches weren't able to tell me about this place. I really just need to share and see if other people found my experience as strange as I did. I'll keep updating with whatever else I happen to see or find out. Now, creepy prison escape penitentiary mental health clinic all in one. I don't know about y'all, but that doesn't sound like the most sane type of place. What was creepiest to me was the fella writing help in his mashed potatoes. Usually these prisoners are like all hard stuff, you know what I mean? But either like this warden or some of their Dr. Kendrick's like psychiatric stuff, these guys are, I don't know, there's something going on here where they're begging to get let out. Looking at the comments, there's not too many. The post was made pretty recently, so there's no updates or anything yet. Really, everybody's just confused and waiting for updates. That brings us to the end of our first story. Going into our second story, which I am now realizing that I may not have enough gameplay in the background because I only played like 3 games before I rage quit because I suck at this game. So we'll see what I throw in there after this. Going into our next story here, titled Not My Mother. So this story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time but it is the mind-boggling thing that I have ever experienced. It is also important to note that it happened in mid-December. I am from Iowa, and the winters here get cold at night. Like if you get stuck outside, you will die kind of cold. The plus and snowfall, that plus the snowfall makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house and even immediately outside of it. Well, me and my best friend were hanging out in the family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night playing video games. We were also the only ones home. The reason it was just us is because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with coworkers. So me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were sitting there opening up the first bottle, I hear the door to the garage open and slam shut. I immediately go, "Oh shit," and start looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then says, "I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night." "She was," I replied. I then heard a few heavy stomps and hear my mother yell out, "Meows and boo, anyone home?" I yell back up the stairs, "Yup, just hanging out in the basement." I hear a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs, and she yells out again, "Can you come help me with something? I need you up here." I reply back while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle, "Yep, give me just a minute." Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. "Anyone down there with you?" She yelled back in a more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off from my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something was right. Our family never cared if anyone was over, as our house was a very open house to all family and friends. And the voice, it was just wrong. Like it sounded like my mother's, but it was missing something that I couldn't out my finger on. Weirded, I replied, "Just Colton." After I yelled back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now, as I was walking up the steps, I couldn't help but feel this overbearing silence of the house and the slight electric twinge that something isn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I look over to where the door to the garage is, and also the kitchen right next to it, and it's black. Pitch black. All of the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen yelling out, "Mom, where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I feel the electric twinge turn into full needles. Okay. Sorry. And my adrenaline kicking in full force. I have to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother was not home. I run back downstairs, grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Colton says. "My mom's not home," I reply as fast as I can, looking for my truck keys. "What do you mean? You were just talking with her." I could see the confusion in his face. "There's no one home. We need to leave now." I took a few steps towards the back door that opens up to the yard, and then I see my dog shaking on the couch and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew that if we left, something would happen to them. "Are we leaving?" Colton said, still confused. "No, I can't leave them here alone. Something is really off. I'm going to call my mom and figure this out." I pull out my phone and call my mom. She picks up immediately. "Meows and boo. What's going on?" she answers. "Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up you weren't there," I said, frantically hoping that she was playing a joke. "No, I'm just leaving the bar. I wasn't feeling very well." "Are you okay? What do you mean you heard me?" I fill her in on the whole story, and she rushes home. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home, but before she did, you could hear something upstairs. Not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air like a black hole was slowly moving from one room to the next. And the word that I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home, you could feel the thing leave just as quick as it came, like an overbearing predatory presence had just flown away. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on, and this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us. But this is the easiest to write down, and the one that I was happy to have a witness. Okay. Am I the only one getting some tingles and shivers down my spine? I'm like looking behind my shoulder. Absolutely terrified right now. I live alone and I honestly wish I didn't live alone right now. Um, Looking to the comments. Shouldn't have read this at 2 a.m. I very much agree. Very much agree. Now, if I had my mother's voice mimicked, not only mimicked, but also calling up to me and trying to lure me into something, oh my goodness, I would be so terrified. It reminds me of the Appalachian mimic type stuff. Let me tell you, I do not do good with those. Absolutely terrifying on those parts. Going into the next story, it is titled, All My Neighbors Stand in Their Windows at the Same Time Every Night. My boyfriend and I recently moved into our first apartment in the city together. We're both from rural areas, so we tried to find a place that we thought would be quiet. We don't want loud people or cars or sirens keeping us up at night. We ended up renting the second floor rear apartment in a small building. The apartments on the front side of the building face a busy street, but the apartments at the back of the building, like ours, face an alley. A small parking lot, some other apartment buildings, we thought we would hear less noise. And we do hear less noise. At night in our bedroom, it gets so quiet that we can pretend we still live in the middle of nowhere. The only issue with the apartment is the view. All our windows face the apartment building next to us or the apartment building behind us. It has made opening the blinds feel awkward, like a bunch of strangers could peer into our apartment, so we usually keep the blinds down. It took months for us to notice it. The first time we saw it, we had arrived home late from a concert. We took showers and talked about how beautiful the moon had looked on the drive home. My boyfriend wondered if we could see the moon from one of our windows, so we turned off the lights and pulled the blinds open. It was a little past 3 a.m. We froze as soon as we looked out the window. The moon no longer interested us. A person stood in the center of almost all the other apartment windows, over 20 people standing at their windows with the lights on inside their apartments. Maybe they all wanted to see the moon too, my boyfriend suggested, but it didn't make any sense. With their lights on behind them, they wouldn't be able to see out of their windows well at all. I made my boyfriend shut the blinds. 10 minutes later, my boyfriend peered through the blinds again. Everyone is gone, he said. I looked outside. Every light was turned off. No signs of life anywhere. It was hard to fall asleep that night. The silence in our bedroom was disturbing, not peaceful. We had to turn on a white noise machine. We agreed that tomorrow we would set an alarm for 3 a.m. and wait to see if anything happened. The next night we sat by our bedroom window with the lights off and the blinds pulled open. At 3, all the lights were off. I counted and we could see 46 windows from our vantage point. At 3:10, all the lights turned on at the same time. Then people appeared in the windows. It was as if they had been squatting beneath their windowsills, and then at the same moment they all stood up. Oof. Everyone was backlit, so it was difficult to make out their faces, but it looked like a mix of men, women, and children. At 3:13, they all sank down again, as if returning to their squatting positions beneath the windowsills. The lights abruptly turned off. My boyfriend and I looked at each other, unsure of what to do. It wasn't the sort of thing you could call the police about. For 3 nights we set an alarm for 3 so we could look out the window. The same thing happened every single time. My boyfriend wanted to investigate more. He wanted to ask the neighbors about it, but we were both shy and didn't know anyone in the city very well. I begged him not to, but on the 4th night he wanted to go outside while it happened. I told him I would watch from inside our bedroom and call for help if something happened to him. At 3, my boyfriend sat in the parking lot. At 3:10, no lights came on. By 3:13, nothing had happened. He came back inside and I thought it might be over. but he wanted to try again the next day. This time waiting to step outside until after the people were standing in their windows. That night, the lights came on at the same time as usual. The people rose to stand in their windows. I watched the back door of our apartment building and saw my boyfriend come outside. He only made it a few steps from the door before he was frozen completely still, pausing in the middle of taking a step. The people disappeared at 3:13 a minute later. My boyfriend started to walk again. He looked up, scanning the dark windows of the apartment buildings, then came back inside. "Guess it's not happening anymore," he said to me when he was back in our bedroom. "You think it didn't happen?" "Yeah, I didn't see anything out there. Did you see something?" I told him what happened. It scared him enough that he decided we should stop investigating. "It didn't affect us," he said. "At first, I was happy to stop looking into it, but lately I've started to wonder. We've met some people in the apartment building behind us, and they seem so nice, so normal. I've started to wonder if it's even them standing in the windows. Each time my boyfriend and I watched the people standing in their windows, I got a dark feeling in the pit of my stomach. I've started to wonder if I need to warn someone." Oh my gosh. Yeah. Just somehow I'm gonna throw you on a big hold right there. Let's stop investigating. One thing I don't get. Oh my goodness. I keep looking behind my back because I'm like actually getting terrified now. One thing I never notice or understand is we need to stop investigating creepy stuff like this. Now I get the urge. If I were to see that, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. I would probably check it again another night. But going outside into it, oh, okay, let's go ahead and stop that right there. We are investigating too much. We're losing the plot here. Now, this last story is a bit of a longer one. And it also seems like the scariest one. I don't really have much gameplay left to really go through it because I just kept dying, so I rage quit. We'll see if I'll just kind of add something back to it later on. But nonetheless, let's get started with this last but terrifying story. Titled, "My wife has been peeking at me from around corners and behind furniture. It's gone from weird to terrifying." My wife Lynn and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character the whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She's always been the no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. Oh yeah, Lynn, I am right there with you. I am not built for horror movies. I am not even built for these Reddit stories. Continuing on. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half of the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea, and that's fine. But that's what's so strange about this. It's just so unlike her. I should also add that she's never had any mental health issues, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I think I'd have seen some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning, and I knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. I took a sip of my coffee as I hurried down the hall towards the front door, when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of time. I could only see her eyes and a strand of her long, dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. I did burn the shit out of my lips. "Geez, Lynn," I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. "You scared the shit out of me." She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry off towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. Guys, I really wish I wasn't reading this right now. I miss the daylight. It was really weird and just totally out of character for her, like I said. But I also find it kind of funny that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I love her and called her a weirdo. As I shut the door behind me, I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, and neither did she, and life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m., and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island, jug of OJ in hand, when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes, grinning like the Cheshire Cat. I'm not really sure what that is, guys. I screamed. I'll admit it, not out of irritation, but fear. For some reason, at this moment, I was scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and feet smacking the tile floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. Oh, whoa. Okay. I didn't run after her, or even yell after her. I just stood there frozen in shock, wondering what the fuck had possessed her to do that. It took me a little longer than I like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did when I got to her bedroom. Lynn was lying on her side, asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while watching her breathe to be sure she was really asleep. I had the feeling she might just jump out at me the moment I got into bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed. She didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep, and I was starting to wonder if I had dreamt the whole thing. Genuinely, guys, I think I would absolutely be gone. I don't know what I would do. I'm just reading the story back right now, and I am absolutely terrified. I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. But what is this guy still doing here? The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her cheek, I decided to ask about it. What was that about last night? I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend her or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. You were peeking at me again from over there, I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that, I said. She giggled and set her cup down on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even, she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hand made on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was just trying to be silly, just trying to join me in my love for all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it still didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or the living room curtains. One time she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might not have even known what she was there had all the old trunk's hinges not given her away. She had the lip propped up just so enough that half of her face peeked through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth she was doing this. She didn't answer, but she had just slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away, feeling disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just hoped she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird prank. I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately, and that she must have given up on her spy games. Oh, she looked up at me with a small smile and said, maybe I've just gotten better at it. I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. Oh, dude, I keep looking behind my back. I'm so scared. I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking and I just hadn't noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching from around the corner or behind the door. I was jumpy whenever I was at home, and she wasn't in full view of me. I felt stupid and a little crazy. But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls and told myself it was just a bad memory. Then a few days ago, things got so much worse. Lynn left to go to her friend's house, and I lounged on the couch and played a couple games on my laptop. Around 9 p.m. I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt the awful feeling that I was being washed. I slowly opened my eyes and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain. Her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long, dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red, as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor did her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was terrified. We stood like that for a few moments. Neither of us saying a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, she slowly pulled her head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards towards the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I was overreacting to some of you, but joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with the crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced in my bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly, I heard a muffled sound and I pressed my ear to the bathroom door, starting to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made feel too scared. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house and made to hide in the bathroom for over an hour, all for what? Some joke? If it was a joke, it was an awful one. What the fuck, Lynn? I snapped. Oh, oops. This shit is getting really annoying. I waited for her to apologize or call me a jerk, but instead I heard a faint moan. So quiet, I wondered if I heard it at all, and then complete silence. Lynn, I called out, not being able to hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response, just my own heavy breathing. I waited for her to cuss me out, something I would expect from her for me talking to her like that. But there was nothing, just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared, too afraid to open the damn door and face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which feels like a lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in my bathroom, so I got down on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy or not about that. I looked for a few minutes waiting to see her head pop up over the top step, but it never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and mentally prepared myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock with my shaky fingers and was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me, feel nauseous when I think about it. A moan louder than before, but this time I was able to tell just where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door as if in slow motion and locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking at me from the slight gap. Her eyes were still wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open in the most grotesque, gaping smile I'd ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short, raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow, I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and ran as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her getting closer. I didn't bother shutting the front door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from fear or the cold, maybe a little of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house, about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call and text I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called me 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I'd gone and why I left like that. There's still a lot left to the story, guys. And I'm not gonna lie, I feel a little scared right now. I threw my phone at the dash in a rage, furious of her attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in a pair of boxers, but told me to stay as long as I needed. I told him Lynn and I had a fight, but didn't get into the details. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside the closet. Knowing she'd been in there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She never left the bathroom. Oh my god, she never left the bathroom at all. And said no, I'm done. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Let me know, next Reddit video, actually no Reddit video ever again, is going to be horror themed. I think I'll just do just other stories, like am I the asshole type stuff. I can't do this. These are too scary. Tune in for the next one where we will not be reading horror stuff.